All right. Super professional here. Clicking the button, then leaning back in the chair.
Yep.
We doing all right?
I believe so. Sorry, people. I'm just making sure. I can't see any of the noise working. Oh, there it is. Yep. Cool.
We're up and running.
Just making sure, mate. Don't want any.
not like last time. All right. With that all done, welcome to the Battleforged Gaming podcast, episode 28. It's been a while. It's been a month in between podcasts simply because we had PAX a fortnight ago. And you haven't been here for a little bit. We've got BFG Mark. He's finally
back,
healthy enough to sit in the chair across from me.
Yes.
I've missed you.
I've missed you guys as well. I've missed the hobby. It's been a bit of a journey, but I'm back, so it's good.
And we've got Scotty from AustralisTWN, the Wargaming Network. How you doing, my guy?
Doing well, thanks, guys. How about yourselves?
Doing pretty good. And before I forget, this is brought to you by Chirnside Park General Games. Thank you very much for sponsoring us on this podcast, guys. So the topic for today, we'll obviously do the catch-up, but the topic for today will be competitive gaming and tournament gaming because it's something that's pretty close to Scotty's heart. Before we get into that, though, we'll do a catch-up because it has been a month. You've been... obviously had some surgery, Mark.
Yes.
And you've been recovering from that?
Yes. Had a couple of complications, but we're good now. So I got out and then went back in. That's why I wasn't able to come to PAX, but I'm out now. So I will be able to get back into the hobby. Judd has sweetened up my life a little bit by giving me some Night Lords. So he's tempting me there, but I need to stay strong and finish off my 1350 points of NIDS because me and Tiny have a match coming up.
You've got a score to settle with Tiny?
I've got a score to settle with Tiny. There won't be any, I doubt we'll even be playing an objective game or anything. It will just be a straight out who can table who first sort of match. It'll be death match. Yeah.
It's basically going to be two 12-year-olds that have just got their rule book, pick up the game and like, you want to roll dice? And just run towards each other.
That's exactly what it's going to be. Yeah. So
you're well on the mend now, which is good.
Yes, it is very good. So
they tried to stop you, but it didn't work.
Takes more than that.
Yeah. So I needed exactly 3 pieces from that Night Lord box.
Mate.
For the Christmas charity model. So I was like, I don't need this box, and I know that Mark wants to do some Night Lords.
Oh yeah. Yep. You've locked in my second army for me now, so yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So apart from that, you haven't managed to do any hobby.
Not painting, more reading into rules, trying to stay up to date with the rules for the NIDS, listening to a lot of audiobooks. I was listening to quite a lot of audiobooks, been in hospital for almost 3 weeks. You don't really have much to do when you're lying in a bed.
Rules are tough, man. I tell you, from someone that, Scotty's probably all over the rules, but from being a painter first and foremost, takes a bit to get back into it. And I feel like you're probably like myself in that you want to be competent, you want to be competent with your rules and the rules of the game before you really start
diving into it too much. Because I'm keen. I like the gaming style, which is great that I'll today hopefully be able to ask Scotty some questions. I love the gaming side behind it, but as you said, I want to be competent enough that people don't have to pull me up too much, even when I first start playing with the rules. I want to know the rules as best as I can, at least for my army, and have a basic understanding of other people's armies as well. Because I don't want to go, because I'll go down to like our local general games and House of War and stuff to play some games with people I don't want to be taken advantage of if I don't know the basics of other people's armies as well. And then, you get home, you're like, whoa, I can't believe this army can do that. And then if I'm chatting with Lockie or something and Lockie's like, they can't do that.
You want to make sure they're playing their rules correctly too.
Yes, as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's about building that confidence. Like I played a game last week. It's the first game in months, absolute months. I think I was pretty good with my rules, and I'll generally only play with people I know, like my friends. I won't do a casual pickup game until I'm at that level. I think I should be playing those games.
Yes, which is fair.
I'll jump into what I've been doing before we ask Scotty some stuff. Yeah.
What have you been up to, Judd?
What have you been up to? So we did have PAX 2 weeks ago, which was just a fantastic opportunity for Battleforged Gaming. We were lucky enough to be invited by Pluto and House of War. Otherwise, we wouldn't be there.
Yep.
You know, PAX didn't ask us to go there. That was an invite from House of War and Pluto Miniatures. We did stream for all 3 days, sitting on some stools, painting some models. So the backs were very, very sore. Like, it wasn't optimal positions. It's all a learning curve for us, though. You know, we learned from that, and what we want to do next time we're in a position where we're basically streaming for 8 hours. Stuff like cleaning up the table and having more cable management, all that type of stuff.
If Secret Labs listen in and they want to sponsor some BFG chairs.
I spoke to Secret Lab when I was there, and there was a very polite girl working there, and I went up and they had the Ultramarine chair, and I sat in it. I was like, hey, this Ultramarine chair is really, really cool. When you go back to Secret Lab HQ, could you please have a word to them about making a Blood Angel one? Because you're going to sell far more chairs if you make a Blood Angel chair than you will Ultramarines. And she just smiled at me and pretended to know what I was talking about, but I knew she had no idea.
It's because you messed up. You should have said they need to make some Battleforged gaming chairs, and then she would have understood what you were talking about. Yes, maybe, come on, man.
Yeah. It would be cool. Like, oh man, imagine but it's all having we use the gaming table. Yeah. So the gaming table is a fantastic height for when you're standing and playing games. It's purpose built for that specific reason. Sitting there doing a paintcast podcast for 8 hours, not great.
Yeah,
not great. So yeah, it was really, really cool. We had a ton of interest in our future paint classes, which will be running out of House of War when we are set up to do that. And the main takeaway from it was people were really, they liked the idea of in-person paint classes.
Yep.
So we've chatted about this. Like, there's a lot of patrons out there. There's a lot of tutorials on YouTube. The one from Battleforged Gaming, absolutely fantastic, I've heard. But you are limited to what you can learn via a video. So there can be simple things that you might be doing incorrect that you can get changed on the spot with someone who can be like, oh yeah, your edge highlights are really good. But if you just come back and you tidy up these edge highlights with your previous color, you'll just fix all your problems instantly, which is not something you typically get through a paid platform tutorial. Yeah. And it's not that I'm trying to take away from those guys that make patrons, because they make fantastic patrons. We've got one too. We just don't promote it because we don't upload enough stuff. So it just feels like people would be giving us funds for nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people just love the idea of doing in-person paint classes. So once we're set up for that, we'll obviously promote the absolute shit out of it, because we want to, you know, have classes fully booked.
100%.
And yeah, so the streaming was sort of secondary at PAX. It was like, yeah, streaming was cool and chatting to the regulars in chat was cool, but we had no control over the lighting. So it frustrated the shit out of me. Anyone would have seen me just playing with the laptop trying to adjust the lighting because we were either too washed out or it was too dark. Like, that's one thing we've learned. We probably need to have a full backdrop, to try and control that. The audio, I think, was fairly good. I need to get Tiny and Marvin to lean into the mics a little bit more if we're going to be doing something similar to that, or whoever the guests are, just because
it wasn't. I was watching. It wasn't.
You were saying it was pretty good.
It wasn't like I wasn't ever struggling to hear them, but you could tell that they were sitting a little bit further away.
Yeah,
than what you were.
I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to that type of stuff. So. Like, I like to eat my mic. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think PAX was fantastic. Very, very grateful for the opportunity we had.
And so, rolling off events, because our guest knows all about events, what has our guest been up to with the hobby himself?
Yeah, I should stop talking. I've just basically written a novel.
Really excited. Nah, it's good.
Scotty, my guy, what have we been up to, dude?
I've been up to a lot recently. So October, thankfully, has been a bit more of a quiet month for me. Before that, it was a bit chaotic. So in terms of hobby-wise, I actually just finished the Space Marine half of the Shadowspear box set. So that was the first introduction box set of all the Phobos Space Marines. It had 10 Infiltrators, 3 Eliminators, the 3 Suppressors, then the Phobos Captain, Lieutenant, and Librarian in it, back from like 2018. So I was very thankful to be able to finish that hobby-wise. In terms of gaming-wise, got a game in the other week against a mate of mine in preparation for a tournament I'm running at the end of November called Gonghammer, which is really good. Got 80 players in attendance for that. We're going to be streaming it, have some guest commentators on, as I'm going to be TOing, so I can't TO and commentate at the same time. But yeah, we've got a whole bunch of events that we've done throughout the year, which has been really solid. I think in September we had a teams event that we covered, which was a 5-man teams. In August we also had a singles event that we were also at. In November, we've got the Gonghammer tournament that I mentioned, but also we've got an 8-man teams tournament happening in Penrith that we're covering on the 9th and 10th of November, I believe the dates are for that one. So really starting to gear up for that because that's 2 weeks away. But yeah, it's just been churning out content and, keeping up to date with the competitive scene as best as possible.
Yeah, wicked. So these events that you're going to be running, is there a link people will be able to find that I'll be able to put in the YouTube for people?
Yeah, for sure. So we've got a Facebook page. So if you search up Gonghammer 2024 on Facebook, you should be able to find the event for it. Or we do have a BCP event page for Gonghammer as well. This is going to be a yearly GT that we run in Wollongong down here in New South Wales. And then we're also going to be looking at doing the ATWN Open, or Australia's Tabletop Wargaming Network Open, the other 6 months a year. So basically we're going to be running 2 GTs 6 months apart every year, hopefully going forward as well. So that'll be really exciting to have consistent larger events happening down this way, as a lot of the events in New South Wales typically happen either in Sydney at the moment or some up in Maitland, Newcastle area as well.
Yep, very cool. And I know it's something that the guys in the tournament scene are always looking for is more events, because, like you were saying, I think Australia sometimes a little bit is starved for a bit more of that competitive scene. Like there's tournaments around, but they're probably a bit more fun, fluffy.
Especially if you don't live close to any form of hobby shops and stuff. Like
Yeah. Super cool. So I guess that's something I can tell my housemate Lockie about. That's probably something he'd be interested in going to for sure.
Yeah, he would.
All right, so
well, we've currently sold out. Sorry, Justin. We sold out this year for Gonghammer in 4 days.
Wow, that's
like,
good.
And that was 80. That was 80 people. You were saying?
Yeah,
that's crazy.
80 players in 4 days.
That gives you an idea of how the tournament scene, like people are wanting tournaments.
Yes.
If you can, and this would be the first Gonghammer ever, correct?
Second one. The first one was a couple of years ago now, run by another TO named Brad. Great guy. He's actually going to be in attendance at the tournament as well. So definitely keen to carry on that legacy that he created with the Gonghammer tournaments. So yeah.
But yeah, see, even years apart, having an event and then running it, just being able to sell it in 4 days is nutty.
Yeah.
I know there was there's a tournament I think that happens bi-yearly called Arkhammer. It's based around Necromunda. Sorry. No, what's it called? Arkmunda.
Arkmunda, yeah.
Arkmunda, yeah. So my friends are going to that and they were like, you need to go, Justin, because you got your Van Sar painted up. I was like, yeah, I know. And I missed out because I was just too slow on it. But that sold out as well. And it just seems to be the case for almost every single Warhammer event, like whether it's Age of Sigmar, 40K, Necromunda, they all seem to be
popular, yeah.
Like selling out. With the popularity of Gonghammer, do you think your next Gonghammer you will increase the numbers, or is that something that would be difficult to do?
So, funnily enough, when myself and my fellow TOs, because I'm not running it solo, thankfully, we had a bit of discussion.
No way you could do that.
Yeah, I learned to tangent off. I learned a very hard lesson many years ago running a 60-player GT solo, and I had one person helping out who volunteered on the day to help, and that was a very hard lesson to learn. So I've kind of got a couple of people around me now to help out with Gong Hammer, which is thankful. But yeah, we did actually have capacity within the venue to go up to 90 players if we wanted to, but we just made the decision to stick at 80, just so that we could get everything running smoothly at the venue. It's the first time we're running it there, and just want to ensure that, you know, it's a great experience for all the players in attendance. It's the circuit finale for the 2024 season for the New South Wales rankings, run by Down Under 40K. So we've got a lot of New South Wales players in attendance. We've also got guys coming down from Queensland. I think there's about half a dozen guys flying down for it. And then we've also got the Dean Simbeck, who's the captain of Team Australia. He's also going to be in attendance to mingle around with the team. If we end up having some other people drop out, he may actually end up getting a spot and playing at the tournament as well, because we do have quite a decent length wait list still. I think we're just under 10 players still on that wait list. So it's really good to have some of the interstate draw, as well as having representation not only for Team New South Wales for the ANZ Team Championships, but also Team Australia for the WTC as well.
Yeah. Feel sorry for whoever drops out and has to verse the Australia team captain. That'd be rough. So we have basically just jumped straight into the topic of today's podcast. So yeah, you're very much solidified in the tournament scene for Australian Warhammer. How did you initially get into Warhammer? What was your first sort of foray into this hobby? Who did someone introduce you to it?
Yeah, so one of my best mates, who I'm still best mates with now, this was back when I was 10, 11. He actually started collecting Lord of the Rings, now called Middle-earth, but it's Lord of the Rings strategy battle game back then.
Dude,
the
amount of times someone comes on and is like, Lord of the Rings got me into it. It's actually wild. I would have never, in the 28 podcasts we've had, I don't know how many guests, we've had repeat guests. Let's just say we've got 20 guests. I would say that 3/4 of the guests say
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings is how they got into it. It's crazy. It's actually crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, I started collecting Lord of the Rings, which is great. That was back in late 2005. And then I actually started playing 40K and collecting 40K late 2008, just after 5th edition released. And so I've been playing 40K basically ever since then. I've been playing in tournaments, specifically for Middle-earth and more casual 40K events at my local GW at the time, from about 2010. And then, started expanding into more independently run 40K tournaments from late 2013, and then jumped in from there full-footed when I moved to Canberra in 2014.
Yeah. So the gaming side of it was always a big draw card for you?
Yes, I'm the eldest brother of 3, and so we would play together a little bit when my brothers were still a bit younger. They don't do the hobby anymore, but we would play together, have fun, and then when I started to spend more time on the hobby and paint, I just enjoyed the gaming aspects. They're very tactical, the nuance behind the rules, and just being able to see what you can do on the tabletop. And I remember for 40K, it actually took me 2 years from learning the game at 5th edition to actually get my first win. And I was very thankful for that win, and I was just keeping on learning and keeping on developing. And it's one of the things competitive players always say is the more reps you get in, the more used to playing an army you get and stuff. And that's very true, even when you're learning the game. And so it was great fun to be able to pick it up and just enjoy the tactileness of the hobby and painting. And there's always something to do with it, in my opinion. So, yeah.
That's a cool point that it took you 2 years to get a win from when you first picked it up. For people that are getting into the hobby, it can be a little bit tricky learning all the gaming side and the painting side of things. We even spoke about it right at the start. Where I still only feel comfortable playing my friends until I'm down with the rules. What sort of advice would you give to people that have got into the hobby, have started gaming, they're potentially losing a lot of games? Maybe they haven't got a win for a while, and they're getting a little bit discouraged. What drove you to to continue playing and not be like, oh man, I haven't got to win. I'm going to stop doing this.
Or even like fresh people, because looking at the rules can be quite intimidating as well. But once you sort of understand the basic mathematics behind it, it's not as daunting as it looks on paper, kind of thing.
Yeah, because you often see battle reports where people are like rolling dice real fast because everyone knows what's happening on the table. I know that Mark is shooting his Termagants at my Space Marines, so he knows what he's hitting on. He knows what he's wounding on. I know what my armor save is prior to all this happening. So that's why the dice roll really, really fast.
Looks fluent, yeah.
Which can be in itself intimidating because people are like, I don't know what just happened. And that's why we're going to do some battle reports that are really slowed down for those people. Yeah, so any advice for people that are feeling maybe a little bit discouraged because they have picked it up and they haven't got a win? What drove you to continue?
Yeah, I guess I'll hit on Mark's question first because you're both hitting on similar things, but can take two different directions. So I'll hit on Mark's part first. For the new players, biggest advice that I have, like getting into the game and learning, is starting small. Like Combat Patrol at the moment is a great way of doing that. Even though it is more in a limited format, it's a great method to learn the game, to play against different factions, whilst also it's still being balanced in some sense as well. And you've got a few special rules. It's a lot more simplified to pick up your factions to start off with. So that's a good starting point. But also, if you're wanting to not play Combat Patrol, playing games at less than 1,000 points or less is my biggest suggestion, because then you don't have you don't have a dozen to 2 dozen units on the table depending on your faction. You're then only having maybe 6 to 8 units that you have to actually know about. You have to know their rules, and it doesn't take as long to get a game in as well at that level. Or say if you've only got 3 hours to play, you can go, okay, cool, let's play 1,000 points, let's make sure we get everything right. And you can actually probably get a full 1,000 point game done in 3 hours by being that thorough, making sure you're getting all the rules right, rather than being like, okay, I've got to play this 2,000 point game, I've got to get all the rules right and everything in 3 hours. It can be very, very stressful at that point. So that would be my suggestion for newer players. But for players who are down on their luck, the biggest thing I actually found for myself when I was going through that period is the rule of cool, playing what you enjoy playing with. Because at the end of the day, the game is for enjoyment. And it doesn't really matter too much that wins or losses come second, in my personal opinion. I think as long as you have a great game, you enjoy yourself, that is the primary reason that I personally play 40k, and I'm sure that's the majority of people out there that do enjoy playing 40k. And so playing units that you enjoy, there was a new unit with 5th edition Space Marines called the Stern Guard Veterans, and this is when they were first introduced. And I loved the idea of the unit straight away. It was something that I just glued onto. And so basically I converted up 5 Stern Guard because I didn't want to buy the metal models. And so I would run 5 Stern Guard in my list basically every game because I love the idea of that unit. And yes, there were times where they did absolutely nothing on the table. But just the idea of being able to see what this unit can do and have fun with a unit that I really like the aesthetics of, really like the lore of, and what they represent in the game was really enjoyable. So that'd be my advice to those who maybe haven't gotten a win in a while, is play with stuff that you enjoy playing with over what is considered the meta takes for an army, or trying to play a meta list that some of these top level players are using at tournaments.
Yep. Very, very good advice there. I think 10th edition in itself is probably better for that anyway, because it doesn't seem like there's too many things in a codex that just flat suck. Where I think in previous editions there were units where it was just like you just steer clear of that.
And I think in the sense as well, with when you're talking about the meta too, the meta isn't always the meta just because of how it plays. It's how people know to play it. So just because someone with experience is playing a list and it works well, it doesn't mean that anyone can grab that list and make it work well too. So
well, I mean, here's the thing, Lockie, because he watches tons and tons of Wargaming videos, Lockie will often come to me and be like, man, I just saw this list. It took XYZ, which normally wouldn't be taken by specific armies. And, they lean into it. It's normally some redundancy because, if you bring one Redemptor to a tabletop and he gets shot off the board, you don't have a Redemptor anymore. And Lockie will be like, they just did stuff that people weren't expecting from a list, because sometimes you play off meta, it will play well against the meta because that's just the way it is. But like you're saying, you can. It's almost like picking up a Magic the Gathering deck from a championship player, and that's cool. You've got all those pieces, but unless you know how to play those pieces against someone else's army, the list might not even work for you. And like Scotty's saying, you might not enjoy it. Ultimately, you want to enjoy playing the game.
Rule of cool, I think that's one of the best rules you can go off, especially with this hobby, because in the long run, the hobby as a price range and as like looking at it from the outside, people are going to be like, the hobby's expensive. But in the long run, I don't believe it should be seen as an expensive hobby. Yes, you buy a box of Space Marines or whatever, $55, $60.
Hot take. It's not even that hot. It's not that expensive of a hobby
because the longevity of it, you get to play with these models forever. So go buy, like, I'm going to say an army that I know cops a lot of flack. Say Tau, for instance. If you're someone that's into Warhammer, but you like Gundam or something,
you want to lose all your friends.
Yeah, you want to lose up. But if you like Gundams, Tau have battle suits. Like,
I did it sick. All I did was paint battle suits.
Yeah.
And I didn't take any marker lights in previous editions, which anyone that's played Tau would be like, you got to take some marker lights. I didn't have any marker lights. All I had was battle suits, and it was horrible. But I had a full board of like crisis suits and riptides, all like jumping around the board.
I don't think we spoke for a while after you did that.
What's that?
I don't think we spoke for a while after you did that. But yeah, no, 100%. Rule of cool. Like, there's something for everyone within 40K. You're going to look at a model and relate to it in some way, shape, or form and start off that. 100%.
Or even a play style. If you're like, hey man, I love the idea of just screaming forward and smashing things in combat. You got orcs, you've got world eaters. Blood Angels are pretty damn good at it. You're going to find something that suits your play style. Oh, I want to play like just a massive gun line. Cool. You've got Tau. You've got Astra Militarum.
I just want to cover the board.
You just want to swarm the board. Yeah. You just want to have the Space Marine 2 lethal difficulty on the tabletop.
Yeah. Awesome.
Just horde. Yeah. So I guess to follow on from that, what are your guys' experience from playing games yourselves, and when you haven't necessarily been playing a lot? I know, Justin, you were saying you haven't played for a while. How do you go about getting a game in when you're, haven't played for a while, or when you haven't got a lot of wins in recently, or haven't maybe had a win for 6 months to a year?
So if I was not having 6 months to a year with a win, that would typically be one game, because that's how often I play. So for me, because painting is number one, it takes me a while to sort of be like, all right, I'm at a point with my painting where I'm happy to play some games, because I want to be playing with painted models. So I would. It was strange. So I got asked by my friend Ash a couple of weeks ago. He's like, "Oh, do you want to play a game of 40K?" And I was like, "No, man, I'm too busy." Like, because I was either prepping for packs, or I'm just like sitting there wanting to paint models. Yeah. And for me, the painting like obviously comes first. So I was just like, "Oh, nah." And then like a month later, I was sort of ready, because I'd painted up. I'd finished painting my ancient for my company hero.
That's the gold one.
Yeah, the gold one. So I was like, do you know what? That squad's done now. I could probably take it on the tabletop. So I was at a point where I was motivated to game with it. And then I will just reach out with my mates that play and just be like, he was like, "Oh, you want to play a 2,000 point game?" I was like, "Nah." To go back to what you were saying, I was like, I'm not ready to play 2K. I want to get my rules right, and I don't want to be rushing things, because he's got a family and stuff like that. So it takes him he might be pressed for time. And I was like, I don't want to be pressed for time. I want to get the game in. I want to make sure we're doing all of our rules right. I just want to take my time.
Yep.
So I said to him, I was like, let's play a 1,500 point game. I can play larger than 1,000. So I'll find someone that I'm comfortable with playing, that I know is going to sort of have the same idea about playing as me. Like, let's get it perfect with rules, and just tee a game up with one of my friends. I think that's one of the best ways to get into gaming is have one of your friends you're comfortable with playing against. That's not there to win, but there to also learn the rules of their army, your army, the rules of the game, make sure everything is done correctly, and not set a time limit either. Like,
if you got that mutual ground with someone as well, where if someone does make a mistake, there's not that angst behind it as well. Whereas if you are playing someone that you don't know and you make a mistake and you're like, and they're like, oh man, you can't do that. And it can kind of become confronting.
Yeah.
Whereas like I know when we're playing at DreamHack, like Tiny pulled me up a couple of times on things I was doing wrong. I pulled Tiny up just from us playing for the few days. And it wasn't like, oh no, you're just saying that I can't do that because you want to win. It was just like, oh yeah, my bad, man. Or yeah. And then that makes the game carry on smoothly. Whereas the second there sort of becomes some angst at the table, it can also throw off the game for you.
I think there's communication in there as well, and knowing what the game is for. So the games at DreamHack were for people that have never played to be able to watch a game and understand what was happening. Yeah. So getting the rules right and playing it slower was paramount. So that's why that was happening. And that's what happened with me and Ash. So Ash knew that we were there to play a game at a speed where we were going to get everything right. It wasn't about taking meta lists. I was taking what I've got painted, which for me is definitely not meta. It's just stuff that I've liked. It's the rule of cool. I took what I had painted, which is not optimal whatsoever. It's not what I would like to take to a more competitive tournament. That's going to take me ages to paint that up, and one day that will happen. But he took what he had painted, I took what I had painted, and we had a blast. Yeah. Now I actually rolled mathematically for once, which is wild. I know for people out there that have seen me do my gambas, where all I do is roll ones and twos. I actually rolled mathematically, and everything sort of went to plan that I wanted to, and it didn't for Ash, but it wasn't even the point of the game.
Was he playing his Militarum list?
He played his Astra Militarum, yeah. My Blood Angels got in a roll and they just kept going, which is cool to see for me. So yeah, I would say for people that are more about the painting side and then the gaming side is secondary. If you've got friends that you can play with, they're the ones you want to play with. Tee up the game, make sure everyone knows why you're playing, what the goal of the game is. It's not just to win, it's to feel comfortable about the rules. And like you said, if someone's doing something wrong, pull them up, but you pull them up in the right way. So like Ash one game was playing with his Bullgrins or Ogrins. I think it was Ogrins, the ones with the Ripper guns. And he shot at me. He's like, like a bucket load of shots, because Ripper guns have a ton of shots. And he's like, I'm hitting on threes. I was like, I think you might be hitting on fours, dude. Like, I don't know if Ogrins are that accurate. So he pulled up his rules. He's like, oh, no, you're right. They are hitting on fours. I wasn't like, no, that's wrong. I was like, yeah, I don't know if Ogrins are that accurate, man. It's okay to ask people, be like,
it's how you ask. Yeah.
It's how you ask. Yeah. Just be like, I didn't realize that strat did that. Can you give us a look? You're like, and then, if they're indeed correct, because sometimes people might be wrong with rules, as long as it's not intentional. We will probably get into some cheating chat at some point during this podcast too. But if someone shows you their strat and it is indeed what they're saying, you'd be like, "Whoa, man, that's powerful! I didn't realize they did that. I
should not have sent my guys at that."
Yeah, that's really good for one CP. Sometimes people do takebacks too. So Lockie talks about takebacks. Again, it's communication. If someone's going to allow a takeback, then I'll probably allow them a take back at some point in a game too. If they're like, oh, shit, I didn't realize your command squad was going to get that many attacks on the charge. Is it all right if I overwatch them?
Or even when we've played games like Oath the Moment, we had games where you're like, oh man, I forgot to Oath the Moment that. And I was like, nah, man, just do it. And then I'd forgot to move one of my stunts. And you'd just be like, man, you let me Oath the Moment, you move the guys. Yeah.
But at the same time, on that note, I would also say if someone doesn't allow you to take back, and they're okay about that, you're like, oh, too much has happened, you can't do that, then I've got one in the pocket for you. You don't get to take back later in this game.
Yeah.
Like, as long as you're polite about it, be like, oh, no, do you remember when you wouldn't let me do that?
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you do this one.
Yeah, 100%. It's just that mutual ground.
Yeah. It's always give and take as well with takebacks and that kind of situation. And I think definitely to your guys' point, it comes across in tone and body language when you're like, oh, do you mind just double checking that? If it's all good, doesn't sound 100% correct. Or so it's always in a frame of just want to confirm to make sure it's 100%. Like I'm a very big proponent of sportsmanship and fair play personally. I think that when you're playing game, you're playing with someone, your armies on the table are versing each other.
Yes.
That's the opposition, not you and your opponent. You're trying to resolve this game and have fun, even at a tournament level. And the point, I think, as well to note is that there has never been, and will never be, unless it's from the Games Workshop studio, then of course it has to be, a perfect game of Warhammer 40k that has been played outside of Games Workshop.
Yeah.
So I think to the point where, you pull someone up on something they get wrong, or they go, oh, I missed oath a moment, I'm halfway through my movement phase. Haven't done any shooting yet, no worries. You can declare your oath target. I think it's also contextual, where at what point in the game are you at? Are you halfway through your charge phase when you go, oh, I've forgotten to declare oath of moment on that target? It's probably too late at that point. Whereas if you're, halfway through your movement or top of your shooting phase and go, oh, I forgot to oath of moment that target, it's, you're still with, nothing's happened in terms of the game state to be able to go, okay, I've got more information than I did at that point in time to actually have that decision be impacted upon knowing more stuff than I did at that point in time when I would normally make that call.
Yes.
So it's things like that, as players, competitive players are very aware of it, but in general, a lot of players, even just more casually, will be a lot more lenient and a lot more forgiving around that with takebacks. Whereas in tournament play, it's not as much, because there'll be a certain point where it's like, well, no, you've got to know what you're doing. You've got to know your list. You've got to know what you're facing. And so they'll have a limit of how many takebacks, or they might just go, I'm sorry, I don't typically do takebacks. I personally don't ask them, and so I typically don't allow them in response, because it's something I don't expect from my opponents. So there's those two sides to the coin.
Yeah, and I think at a tournament, like when you're at a ITC tournament or something, or the gong. At the gong, yeah, it is different.
Yeah.
When you're in a casual pickup game, especially if it's with one of your friends and it's one of those learning experiences. I know that there are some people that love to just get wins at pickup games. They're typically the people I don't enjoy playing, because it's not the point of it. Unless you're like, hey, I'm going to be practicing for a tournament. I've got a tournament list. You bring a list you would bring to a tournament, and let's have a pickup game.
Yeah.
Then it's all right. But would you promote people reminding their opponent of rules if it's in a friendly situation? So like an example would be if I'm playing Mark and I do forget my oath of moment and it's one of my rules and you're trying to learn to be better in a game, would you promote your opponent, say Mark, going, hey dude, are you going to oath something?
I think if you're in an environment where you're trying to learn, like if it's a practice game for an event or you're trying to learn a new army or something, 100%. Like you're there to learn, you're there to grow your understanding of the rules and how it works. So 100% I'm on board with that. I think in a more tournament setting, it might be like, I'll remind you this once, but going forward, make sure that you're on top of it yourself.
Yeah.
And so that would be the stance in more of a tournament setting, in my opinion.
Yeah. And again, it's all that communication, that tone, and just be like, hey dude, you forgot oath of moment. I'll let you do it this turn. If you forget for the rest of the game, I'm like, it's going to,
especially in a tournament,
it's going to be on you.
In a tournament, if you're paid for a ticket and you're going there to win, like as Scotty was saying, it's a lot different than just a casual game.
But some people are going to win because they want to rank up in those ITC and they want to go to bigger events, and they might have the LVO or something as a goal they want to go to. So like that's completely understandable. I on the weekend when I was playing Ash, he had a unit and he was like declaring where weapons were going, and he didn't declare all these weapons on a sentinel or something. And he's like, oh, the plasma cannon's going to shoot you a Redemptor. And I was like, where's the hunter killer going and where's this going? And he's like, oh yeah. So like, I'm cool with reminding people when it comes to that type of stuff.
At the games that you've seen, Scotty, have you ever had people get overly amped or frustrated to a point where you've had to tell people to calm down? Obviously, you don't have to name events and that, so you're not criminalizing yourself or anything, but have you had situations where you've been with that or not really?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I have. I've seen it at events that I've run as a TO, and I've also seen it at events where I'm a commentator, like I'm doing the stream.
Okay.
And so I've seen how other TOs have actually had to handle those situations as well.
Yeah.
I've seen it where, you know, between plays, it's almost come to like physical altercations, and basically myself and one of my fellow TOs jumped in and was like, okay, cool, what we're going to do, you're both going to get a draw here. It's just going to be, we're calling that game. You guys just walk away and cool off. We're just going to leave it on the table. And it helps when that situation was the last round of a tournament.
Yes.
Whereas other times, if it's like round 4 out of a round 5 event and it's happened, it's generally like, you know, it's one of the higher tables. It's potentially going into the final match to determine who wins the tournament or who ends up on the podium. So there's a lot of emotions involved. It could be, you know, it could just be the simple thing of where people just don't get along with each other.
Yep.
And, you know, you're never going to get along with everyone. But I think everyone can make the effort to be civil, polite, and respectful to their opponents. And maybe that hasn't occurred during the game, whether it was one player's fault or another player's fault. And then sometimes a judge will step in. And that's why the code of conduct that's is predominantly used. It used to be called the ITC Code of Conduct, but it's now the Frontline Gaming Code of Conduct that they use for just their events, because the ITC is now run by Games Workshop. And so that's something we use at Gonghammer, and it's like, well, if there is a player decorum issue, it's then a yellow card, or depending on the severity, it could be a red card with a game loss, could even, you know, how severe it is, it could even mean that the player's just straight up disqualified from the tournament or is ejected from the tournament, you know, after that point, or they just get a game loss for that round. I've seen it where a TO has had to make a call and they've gone, okay, cool, because of this situation, you're both getting 0-point losses because of the two players being involved in that situation. And so it just depends on, every TO is going to make their own calls, and I think it also speaks to a bit of professionalism from the TO as well. I come to it as a tournament organizer. I want to run the most professionally run and organized event as I can. Because at the end of the day, people who buy tickets to attend my events that I run, they are customers in my opinion. They're buying the ability to come and play 5 rounds of Warhammer at an event that I'm putting together. And so I want to make sure they have the best experience possible for their money. And if something like this happens, then I need to be prepared as a TO to step in and go, hey, this is what we've got in place in terms of code of conduct. You've breached the code of conduct here. This is the penalty for that we're going to imply. And so, yeah, it's one of those things that every TO is going to make their own call, but having those systems in place is super important so that you kind of not necessarily miss, but you kind of, head off. Like you kind of go, here's the expectation up front. You have it in the players pack. And so if players rock up and something does happen, well, by playing at the tournament, you've agreed to what's in the players pack, which includes the code of conduct, and so you know they're aware of it ahead of time. So cool. I think it's always about communicating that.
It's basically almost like a sporting code. Yeah, where like, you know, in the AFL, if someone makes high contact with their head in a collision, it's automatically going to be 2 weeks. So you know, if you're not abiding by the code of conduct rules, you know, like you're going to get a yellow card. Like it's literally in the rules. Yeah. Has there ever been a case where people have been banned from future Warhammer tournaments? I'm assuming there would have been.
Yes, I've seen it happen. Generally, it will be dependent on the TO. A lot of independently run events will have it, at least in New South Wales, from what I've seen, they'll potentially ban a player from their events that they run, and other TOs will make their own mind on those players. But it could also be, you know, what has happened in the US that I've seen. You know, there's a few notable players in there that have copped 3-month bans or 6-month bans from the ITC and events within their region because of cheating allegations or misplaying rules consistently and being very win at all costs is the term that kind of denotes that, not necessarily personality as a whole, but more that leaning and being like, oh, I want to make sure that I'm winning. I want to make sure that, you know, I'm performing the best I can because there's points on the line, there's prizes. And so being able to be, you know, have rules in place to go, well, if you're going to do that, that's not okay. and have the bans put in place, have players stripped of ITC points, of rankings points, have players stripped of prize support. And, I think it's important to have those systems in place. But here in New South Wales, it's very dependent upon the TO, even though a lot of us TOs do talk with each other as well. And of course, it's going to be different for different states in the country as well. It's going to be different for Victoria. It's going to be different for Queensland. It's going to be different South Australia, etc.
Yep.
I think it'd be good if there was a blanket rule across all of Australia, and it's probably something that will eventually happen where it is stuff like, hey, you've effed up at this tournament. Guess what, buddy? You can't go to any tournament in Australia that's related to ITC
for a while. Yeah.
Or they are allowed to go to tournaments. You can come to this tournament
to watch,
but you're always going to get a 0. You're always going to get a big fat 0. So you can still come to our tournaments and play.
Because you don't want people like that.
And you can learn how to play the right way, but you're going to get big fat 0s.
Because you don't want people like that wrecking the hobby for other people. You don't want that one person playing up in an event to make someone else that doesn't feel as comfortable out in public going, well, if this is what's going to happen at the tournaments, I'm not going to enter anymore because I don't want to have
one bad egg across 5 games might ruin the experience for 5 people.
Which anyone watching, it's not a lot of people like that in the hobby, so don't have that fear that you're going to come into the hobby and there's people like that, because I haven't personally witnessed a lot of people like that.
Yeah, I was just going to say off Justin's point is where one person attending, if they're a notable bad egg, that could actually stop 5 players from wanting to attend that event if they see that player actually attending as well.
Yeah.
So it won't just mean that there is 5 players who necessarily have a bad experience. It's also 5 other players that will go, well, if that person's playing, I don't want to even risk the chance of playing against them, so I'm just not going to go.
Yeah, 100%.
And this sort of touches on our point of people that are the win at all costs to the point of cheating, which like we were talking about before the podcast, is something that we just can't relate to at all. Like wanting to, and like you're on more of the gaming side than what we are. And you were just like, look, I love gaming. I love tournament play, but like, it's not the be all and end all. I'm lucky enough not to have played people that have cheated on purpose. There's been misunderstandings of rules, but like there hasn't ever been like there's someone that created their own war scroll cards. You know, the data slate cards you get in the pack.
Yeah.
They did that and they did stratagems and they typed their own stuff up and like used that on the tabletop. Yeah, and thought they were going to get away with it.
That's wild.
Like the idea of people cheating at a tournament and thinking they're getting away with it is actually insane. Like
I can't understand it.
A lot of tournaments now are getting like you stream tournaments now. There's heaps of tournaments in the States that get streamed. If you are cheating at a tournament, and let's say you're doing it the right way, cheating, so you're not getting caught leading up to being on the top table, you are going to be streamed on the top table and you're going to continue to do what you're doing. There are thousands of people watching and they're going to be like, bro, I can see what you're doing there.
Yeah.
Like what you're going to get caught cheating. Like it just happens. It's the same.
And that's what's happened to a lot of players in the States, actually. Is that Wargames Live's president or Tabletop Live or some of these other groups in the States have actually streamed games and the players have been caught because someone's watched the game that plays the faction that they're playing and they've gone, actually, no, that's incorrect. They've played this wrong. They've played this wrong. And then they go and I'm not sure if you would have seen, but there are times where there's a massive Reddit post, it blows up, it spills over to Facebook groups, TOs get notified, and it's like, okay, now TOs have to deal with that. So it's a good side of having the streaming stuff that it is caught, but it also can create problems if you're not aware of problematic players in terms of who you end up putting on stream.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't particularly go and see the Reddit posts and the Facebook posts and stuff, but Lockie tells me about he's like he's like, oh, come watch this video. He's like, this dude literally just got caught on stream cheating. Like it's insane. And he's had he himself has had experiences at tournaments where people have tried to bend the rules, Lockie himself, and he's like, there's literally cameras watching our table right now. Like, what you're doing is not allowed in the rules. So without naming names, because I don't know the names, people were rolling dice behind terrain. There's a dice tray there. You need to roll on the dice tray. They were rolling dice behind terrain, and they were like, I just got an 11-inch charge. And they got like 3 in a row. And he's like, you got to roll that in the dice tray, dude.
Yeah.
So that's exact. Like he may have got 3 11s in a row, rolling it behind terrain. But the rules are you roll in the dice tray.
Needs to be clear for both parties
for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah, rolling in the open's a big thing. There's a lot of stuff that expands from just player decorum in these codes of conduct that I'm referring to. There's talking about how to use chess clocks effectively and not to weaponize that against your opponent. You know, how to actually roll dice and make sure they're in an open area where both players are able to see, or, you know, if not, then having your opponent come over and actually look at the result to ensure, yes, that's okay. You know, the good thing is about the Warhammer 40k app, I know a lot of people aren't the biggest fans of it, is that at least you can go for the indexes still and look up the rules and go, hey, actually, hang on, here in the app, this is what the rule actually is for that unit.
Yeah.
Of course, for other codexes and stuff, it's not as accessible. Fortunately enough for Gonghammer, I've actually been able to request through the ITC tournament organizers group to actually have access to all of the codex codes, to actually have access to all the rules and codexes that the tournaments I run going forward, to actually allow players to go, hey, I'm not 100% on this rule. Can you just double check it for me in the app? And I can literally whip out my phone, put in the unit, or pull up the army, or pull up the stratagem, or whatever, and just go, actually, yeah, this is what it says in the app. That's how it runs. They could be like, okay, cool. That's from an official source, from a third party being like, no, that is actually how it's played. And that's the biggest role of the TO.
Yeah, cool.
It's fantastic that you've got all the codes for that. That's really, really cool, because they also update the wording from the codexes too. So it's good that you've got all the codes. I still haven't got my app to work yet.
Oh, really?
No.
Wild.
Yeah, it can be a bit clunky to get up and running. I certainly struggled a little bit. I was like Googling and I went, how do I get this to work? And it was like, oh, you've got to go to the website, and then you've got to go and link your Warhammer account, and then you've got to update your app. And it's like, all right, cool, enter the code on the website, do this, do that, get it all done. It's like, oh, great, it works now. Perfect.
Yeah, I struggled with that stuff. I'll get round to it one day. Yeah. So that's to touch on the point of people cheating is just, you're gonna get caught if you're wanting to win at all costs. I like being competitive at a tournament is fantastic, and wanting to win, especially if you've got like aspirations to be a tournament player at a high level. But winning at all costs to the point where you need to cheat, like you need to start questioning why you're doing it. Like your wins are empty, right? Like it's literally an empty win. It's like hacking in a video game. Like you've just defeated a whole lobby, but you're not playing the same rules other people are playing.
Yeah,
it's actually interesting with that whilst the wins are empty, if someone cheats and they podium and they get first place, often at events nowadays, there's hundreds of dollars of prize support on offer, which is like, say you pay $80, like Gonghammer was $80 for entry. First place prize might be, say, $500 worth of stuff. You've basically, you know, stolen 6 people's worth of entry fees, or sponsors have provided those prizes. You're basically taking them and committing fraud in a sense, because you've cheated your way to actually win those prizes, and it's illegitimate. And so they're, you know, to Justin's point about there potentially not being a game, well, for some in tournament settings there are, because there are financial gains. Some tournaments do cash prizes up front where they go, first place is going to get $1,000, or they might get you know, the Warhammer World Championships that happens in Atlanta every year. There might be a golden ticket on offer, so they cheat their way at that event to get that golden ticket. So there is incentives in there for players that do want to go out and do it, and it's often that is their motivation, because they want that prize, and so they go, well, I'm going to try and cut my way to it and not play legitimately. The beautiful thing about 40k is that often in competitive circles we'll say 50% of it is list design, 30% of it is player skill, and 20% is luck.
Yeah.
If you don't get that luck on the run, then you can't guarantee coming first or coming second or whatever. You do the best you can, obviously. But if someone cheats with like weighted dice or things like that, they remove that 20%, then it's like, cool, that they're basically removing a fifth of the equation to coming first in that sense.
I tell you, when you're talking about the percentages of like play, like the list and then like the player skill and stuff like that, the people that are typically cheating are the guys that don't have the player skill as well. And if you're feeling attacked with that comment, good, you should feel attacked. No, honestly, you can. They like Lockie tells me about guys that play in the Australian team and like their level of skill and the way they play and dismantle like other people's plans, and they're already like a turn ahead. They know what's going to happen. Like the people that are cheating aren't at that level because they think the cheating's going to carry them.
It's that meme with that woman, know how it's got all the mathematical equations popping up in her head, and she's looking. That's when Lockie's talking about some of those guys. That's what I picture in my head because they're wild. The amount and the hours that they put in. That's the thing that gets me with people with cheating, like especially Warhammer games. I guess like video games is the same, but with Warhammer, you've got people that are putting in a lot of their passionate time to do something properly. For someone to think that they can just step in and be like, "Oh, I want the golden ticket, so I'm going to do this to get the golden ticket," as an example, when you don't deserve it. Someone that's put their time and effort into it to dismantle the game, dismantle other armies, and I don't think you're a very good human being if you're doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. So if you feel attacked and you're a person that cheats, and hey, Justin from Battleforged Gaming said I've got no skill when it comes to the game, dude,
look at yourself.
Yeah. And then
do better, as Lockie says.
Guys, and then the guys that are the high level guys that do put that work in and are playing the game the way it should be played on the tournament scene, right? Because there's that different way to play the game. You are playing everything with how the rules are like meant to be played. So you it's not looking for loopholes, but like it's knowing every single nuance, like having your guys being able to do like heroic interventions all the time, which you typically won't. Like we wouldn't be playing. I'd be like, I completely forget about heroic intervention a lot of the time, or a squad that can do heroic intervention, and those guys also. Scotty was talking about the emotions that are involved. The guys that will play at the highest level often separate the emotion from the game altogether. Like they enjoy the challenge of the strategic side of the game, but it's just become chess to them. Like it's literally just chess, and that's where they get their enjoyment from, is playing someone else who is similar to them, who's a high level player, and it's just like a back and forth,
playing mind games with pieces.
Exchanging your pawns and just not getting emotional about, oh my God, I can't believe you just killed my Redemptor.
It's like you were saying, like previously, it's like, holy moly, you just did that. I did not think about doing that. Or my counter plan did not have that incorporated in. And there's that excitement. That's where they get their excitement from, because it's like, all right, you've completely changed my game strat now because you've taken out a unit I was expecting to do this with. Now I need to do this. So those are the players that I respect.
Yeah, it's also coming at it, like even in my game recently, it's like coming up with a strat and doing something that your opponent might not anticipate, but it actually meets the ends that you want to achieve on the table, but it still forces a question for your opponent to actually deal with. And that's what some of the highest level players will do. Even though they know how what they do into someone else's force might do, it comes down to the random card draws on tactical objectives. What can they do to achieve primary, and how can they try and stop their opponent achieving primary or secondary points? And so sometimes in competitive games at the highest level, you'll see some of the most unorthodox strategies that come from these players because they need to do that and win against their opponent, because they are at such a high level, much like themselves. You look at guys like Stephen Bosch, Nick Nardavardi, some of these top level competitors that run, Stephen runs Vanguard Tactics, Nick runs Art of War with the guys, like they run coaching services. They help people learn the game and develop their skills in the game. And so, and they've got coaches under them that run different factions and stuff as well. And so they're probably going to be up on a lot of the game. And so to go up against some of these players, you need to be at their level to even try and compete tactically on the table against them. It takes a lot of skill, takes a lot of practice, and that's where reps come into it. A lot of tournament players will often get at least one game a week, if not multiple games in a week, to actually stay up to date with the rules. They're constantly looking at their FAQs, constantly being like, okay, what's the latest faction that's come out? Okay, Blood Angels, for example. Let's have a look at all the detachments. Let's have a look at the units, how do Blood Angels lists now work, and talk about that with their mates who might be Blood Angels players, and they work together with each other and things like that. So there's a lot of nuance that goes into being a top level competitive player.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that for a fact because Lockie plays like 3 times a week. It's crazy. And he'll just be like, he catches up with the Team Vic dudes and they get those reps in. And it's like anything, the more you do it, the easier it gets. It's like painting. You're like, oh man, edge highlighting so difficult. Tell you what, it won't be if you edge highlight once or twice a week, every week for a year. You get better at it. It's the same with the gaming. And look, I've heard multiple people talk about this in Australia. Have you noticed, because you hold tournaments, Australians usually play, well, not usually, but like we play like off-meta lists a lot of the time because our miniatures are so expensive that people will typically stick to a faction and they sort of become a specialist at said faction. Have you noticed that at tournaments? Like people, like the same guys turning up just with the same faction instead of being like, oh, the new hotness is Gene Stealer cults. And then like a guy that would play Blood Angels rocks up with his Gene Stealer.
So yes and no. So the common other saying that goes along with this is that the Australian 40k competitive meta is both 6 months ahead and 6 months behind of everywhere else. Because we're either playing what everyone else was playing 6 months ago, but the list that we've come up with are so far 6 months ahead that the other metas haven't really picked up on it too much. So it's kind of this dichotomy between those two viewpoints. But hobby lag is definitely a thing. However, I do know a lot of competitive players, they'll kind of specialize in maybe 2 factions, so that if one faction's not performing particularly well, and they, you know, maybe they've worked within their collection, they've done the best they can to try and get a working list, and they just can't seem to get effective wins at a tournament or can't seem to do well with it, they might swap to their other faction that might be performing better, see what's going on with their collection, see what they can put together, and maybe they'll actually perform better with that faction compared to their other one. So whilst there is the sense that there are a lot of faction specialists out there, like I know a number of them that, you know, maybe they just play Thousand Suns or maybe they just play Orcs, but at the same time, there's a lot of players out there that will play 1, 2, maybe 3 factions, so they can kind of rotate it, keep fresh, because also if you're playing the same list over and over and over again, it kind of gets a bit mundane, it kind of gets a bit repetitive, especially if you're constantly winning games or you're facing the same faction. Whereas by playing other factions, it also allows you to understand how that faction plays when you play against them. It gives you that internal knowledge to go, okay, Vanguard Tyranids, I know that they can do advance and charge, I can know they can do battle shock stuff, and all these different things because I personally play that list, so I know what I'm doing going into Vanguard Tyranids. Whereas if you didn't personally play Vanguard Tyranids, then you mightn't have that and you were just a faction specialist. Here's the interesting thing that I'm always big on with this saying is that a jack of all trades is a master of none, but everyone forgets the second half of it, which is that a jack of all trades is, whilst they are a master of none, they are better than a master of one. So if someone plays at least, say, 2 to 3 factions or are familiar with it, say maybe you don't collect the army, but you play games with it on TTS, then you've actually got experience playing into it. It allows you to understand some factions across the metagame rather than just being like, I just play this one faction and that's it. And that's all I'm concerned about is my faction. Yeah.
And you touched on the TTS, which is a really, really good tool for people with getting into the tournament. When it first sort of came out, I was just like, oh man, this is like cheating. Ain't no one going to paint their armies. But now it's become more of like a practice tool for people to be able to, you know, they otherwise might not be able to drive to where their teams and stuff, because there's a lot of Australia seems to be based around team tournaments. Again, chatting, I get like firsthand from Lockie, it's just a different tournament scene. Like you aren't necessarily going in looking for a win at a tournament scene sometimes, like the team stuff. You might be going in and being like, I need to get X amount of points and just hold my opponent to like an X amount of points so your team can get the W in the end. Yeah. But geez, I lost where I was chatting about. Typical
TTS. I think I can pick up
the TTS.
TTS. Yeah.
So it's really good. It's a really good tool for that practice type of stuff where you could just be like, you know, me and Mark might not be able to meet down at a gaming place, or you could be in Queensland, and you might be able to do a TTS against me, so you could practice your NID list against something, which it was the same thing.
And it's I
thought airbrushing was cheating too. With painting armies, I was like, oh, you damn cheats, you just used an airbrush. It's not, it's just another tool. They're all just just another tool.
Yeah, and I think different sizes of teams as well. I know like the Australia-New Zealand Team Championships, Team Australia, a lot of the Queensland, some of the Queensland actually, some of the New South Wales teams, they're mainly 8-mans. But if you look at more granular within your state, you might have 5 or 6-man teams tournaments. I know Queensland does 6-mans, New South Wales and Victoria typically do 5-mans for 2-day events. And sometimes for single-day RTTs, they'll actually do a 3-man team tournament, because it's a lot easier to get 3 people together to do a teams event for 3 rounds on a single day than it is to do 5. And so having that differentiation between 3-man to 5-man to 8-man means that if you're excelling at 3-man as a pack of 3 players consistently, then, you know, it's relatively easy at a 5-man level to get 1 or 2 players to come into the mix and then go, okay, cool, we've got a solid 5 now. You bring up those 2 players to that next level, and maybe this, you know, they make 2 3-mans, and maybe that 6th player that doesn't play is a coach for the team, and they kind of do that captains or coaching role where they talk to the different team members on the day and they go, hey, we need you to be pushing, for example, to try and get some additional points because we're down on Matrix on another matchup. And, you know, then from there, it's like, okay, cool. Now we go to the 8-mans from there. And you might only take, you know, for Team New South Wales or Victoria or South Australia or even Team Australia, you might only take 1 or 2 players from a 5-man within a state, or you might even take only 1 player per state. You know, having spoken to Dean personally, he tries to get as many players from across the country as he can within Team Australia to actually go over to Europe and compete against some of the best teams in the world. You can't necessarily pick everyone that's great, but something I love about Taylor Hill, who is the Team New South Wales captain, and his ethos is looking to build a squad of 24 players that are all looking to be a part of the team, but want to, you know, grow together, help each other learn consistently throughout the lead up to the team, and then picking those, you know, those final 8 who are up and ready to go. Because, you know, maybe it's the meta picks, you know, maybe this faction's performing really well in teams. You know, we're seeing Imperial Guard, Astra Militarum, coming through the ranks now, being probably one of the higher performing factions, actually dethroning Thousand Suns in the meta. And so seeing that, you might go, well, if a Thousand Suns players might be super good and might know what they're doing, it's... I'm shooting myself in the foot a little bit here because Michael House, who's the vice captain, is a Thousand Suns player for Team New South Wales. But it's also, you know, they might go, well, we'll look to bring up from the 24 our best Astra Militarum player because they're red hot at the meta in the moment, over, say, picking up a Leagues of Votann army. It's a lot of things like that will go into a team composition and a team construction in that environment for teams events. And the thing that also helps is playing singles. I think a lot of people will go, yes, teams is a great way to play 40k. Some will say it's the best way to play 40k, but I think singles is an environment where you can get exposed to so many different lists, so many different archetypes, so many different players within your scene, if you're consistently attending 1-day RTTs, 2-day GTs, that help you actually go, well, let's put a 3-man together, or let's put a 5-man team together for this team's tournament. And, you know, the singles does also carry into Team Australia or your state teams, you know, picking choices for the players. It does play a part. So it's important for a lot of players to play at both styles of events as well.
Yeah. And like that New South Wales 24 to build a team of 8 is very similar to any sporting team, you know, like you see teams in the NBA and stuff. And if you don't have a bench, then you can have the best players ever. You could have 3 of the best all-stars ever. You might struggle in the finals. When it comes to crunch time, you might struggle. And you would assume typically if you've got a base of 24 guys to form an 8, that the guys that are down, like the new inductions and stuff like that, obviously bring in some new motivation because they're like hyped to play these like higher tier players. And it would obviously boost the skill of the other guys because they're just like, oh man, this dude's like super hungry. I've got to, you know, make sure I'm doing my part too because, you know, competitive builds enthusiasm, and I think that's fantastic.
It also helps develop the player skill across the entire state as well, with taking that 24 pack and going, okay, we're scrimming within each other and you know, developing as a 24 pack. And, you know, it might be some players from down here in the South Coast. It could be some players up in Newcastle. It could be guys up in Coffs or Port Macquarie or even in Sydney. Or it could be guys out in Wagga or Orange. And they take the skills that they learned from Team New South Wales and they take it back to their local area, and they can impart that development into their local scene to boost everyone in the local scene up. And so then across the entire state, the player level increases dramatically because of it, is also another factor.
It's exactly like I'll chat about Lockie a heap on this podcast because like he's in the competitive scene. It's exactly what Lockie has done with a heap of stuff in the House of War scene. He's been part of some team tournaments there, like the 3-man stuff. And he's got like a core group of guys, exactly what you're talking about. He's got a core group of guys that he plays a ton of games with and then like gives them opinions on lists and stuff like that. And he tries to put the list building on us a lot of the time, which is good because it helps, you know, it helps you, Mark, realize what's good in the Tyrannid codex and stuff like that. When you're at that level, we're not at that level of wanting to play to that tier of stuff, but it's good for you to know. So we're getting exactly what you're talking about here firsthand.
6 warriors with venom cannons.
Nah, don't even talk about. Oh man, yeah. He came in one day and he's like, oh, the boys have been playing with the new Tyranids codex, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's sick. He's like, oh yeah, he's like, Tyranid warriors with ranged weapons go hard, and like I built like 3 Tyranid warriors with ranged weapons. They're all right. And he's like, dude, getting hit by 6 venom cannons hurts. I was like, I'm gonna swear here. I'm like, who the fuck is taking 6 venom cannons in one unit? I was like, you can't do that, bro. I was like, no wonder they hit hard. He's not playing by the rules. So yeah, we're getting firsthand experience of like one person that's gone to the Team Vic stuff coming and inspiring a whole bunch of new players to get to that level of gaming, which is absolutely fantastic.
It's helping people look at the game in a way that they never would have looked at it previously. And that's what it comes down to with what Scotty was saying. If playing with the same people all the time isn't a bad thing, but you're going to get in the routine of playing with the same people, you're going to sort of know how each other plays, and you're going to get to a point where you're always playing the game the same. Whereas when you get someone like that comes in with a different aspect, different look, different list, it just changes up everything completely. And that's where I think the hobby is excellent, because the hobby doesn't ever stay the same forever. Like, it's always changing. It's an forever changing hobby. They change models, they change the list, they bring in new models, they bring in new rules, and so it's always changing.
Yeah, always in flux.
Yes.
And I think that's the other thing as well, is that yes, you can have those smaller groups that you're tight and knit with. As you were saying, Mark, there is that glass ceiling that you will eventually hit. It's when you start going to, maybe you drive half an hour or an hour out of your way to go to an RTT, but it's completely out of your normal playing circle. And so that's where you can kind of start to break through that glass ceiling, and then you bring that back to your local scene. Or maybe someone within your local scene wants to try a new faction, and that's a way that you can break through the glass ceiling, because then you learn to play up against that faction as well. So there's different ways you can go about breaking through that skill ceiling, but at the end of the day, as you break through more ceilings, the harder and harder it gets to actually break through them, because then you're looking, okay, I need to go to an interstate event where I know hardly any of the players to try and, come in the top 10, for example, or top 8 at Gonghammer. If I want to come top 8 there, some of the Queensland guys might have this actual mentality that are coming down where they're like, look, I know the names of some of the players. I've maybe played against them once or twice, but there are people here that I do not know their names of. I don't know how they play. I don't know what they play. I'm going there to try and be the best player that I can and learn the most that I can from playing up against other players and potentially break through my own skill ceiling.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
And to relate with that, with the skill ceiling and finding like groups of hobbyists to do it, with my love, the painting, I feel it's very similar. I don't go to painting comps, but it would be very similar where you build this group of hobbyists that are all like really love the painting side of the hobby, and they can help you elevate your painting. So you might have someone that is like myself, really enjoys edge highlighting, and some people struggle with that. And then it just takes me to inspire that person to start doing that edge highlighting, or someone might be really good with wet blending, and I've always struggled with wet blending. And in person, they're sitting there with me, and I'm like, geez, man, how have I found this so hard? What you're doing there just
wet blending's sick. I love
makes it look so easy. So it goes with the painting side of the hobby as well.
And I think honestly it goes with any aspect in life, but it's also to kind of tie it into what we've been talking about. It also comes into the commentary side that I do with 40K. I can look at guys like Joe at Wargames Live, or I can look at the Canadian Live guys, the Tabletop Live, or I can look at what Adam Camilleri does with GW and WTC stuff, and just see the level of their commentary or how they run their streams for tournament coverage, and go, okay, how can we improve here at the network? How can we elevate our coverage? How can we ensure that we're keeping up with the standard that people expect? And also looking outside of the hobby, commentary of 40K and streaming 40K events is only relatively new. It's only happened in the past 5 to 10 years. Frontline Gaming first started it doing LVO, and then, we've had small pockets pick up here and there. Some people consistently do it. Others have tried it and they found, no, it doesn't really work for us. And so I think looking outside of 40K, I was just actually, to tangent a little bit, I was watching some of the Magic the Gathering. They've got their World Champs happening this weekend over in Las Vegas, and I was just literally watching some of them just to learn from how their commentators commentate a game, because it's very similar to how you would potentially commentate a 40K game. And being able to pull various skills from different realms into content creation and streaming and tournament coverage for competitive events is really important, in my opinion.
It's good that, you're trying to learn from other people's streams, because I think for the most part, people seeing streams that would be commentated would see stuff like League of Legends or Super Smash Bros, where there's like that instantaneous like action that's happening. So like you've got that explosive commentary, which typically wouldn't really happen with a Magic the Gathering or a Warhammer. You'd be like, so this unit's going to fire at this. Like obviously there's some crazy ass rolls.
I was going to say, like, let's say you're waiting on one wound and they need the 6 to finish it off or something. Yeah. That's when whereas I'm a League of Legends player, but I get what you're saying. Like a team fight starts happening in League of Legends and the co-host and the host go nuts. Yeah. Because you don't know what's going to happen. They start saying all the players' names. Oh, he's doing that. He's doing this. Whereas like with Warhammer, it's exciting for the people that play, but it doesn't have that burst. Yeah,
there'll be the occasional dice roll where it'd be like, he needs this to happen. And then there'd be like that wow moment. But when you're watching the like video game commentating, like it's almost like
happening.
the wow's happening the whole time. The wow's happening like the whole time. So, yeah, I got asked the other day for my. I actually set up an Amazon storefront because I got asked what I use to stream my painting streams. So it's similar to that. Someone was like, "I like how you do your painting streams. What do you use for it?" So I gave them an Amazon list of what I use and was like, you can use all of this, but some of this you don't actually need. Like you don't need the Rodecaster and the pod mics. Get yourself a really nice mic and that will probably suffice. Yeah. I got this because I need to run 4 mics sometimes.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it just comes down to because I also get that question a lot when I'm doing hobbying sessions and stuff, because people also ask me the same thing, and it's always like, well, what works for you is great, but also at the same time, find what works for you. You don't necessarily need it all. When it comes to tournament coverage, for example, I know, Justin, you guys are looking to do tournament streaming and stuff as well. I know for myself, we can look to Joe over at War Games Live and see that he's got 50 million different PTZ cameras, and they're all looking one way, and then he'll swap to another one, they'll look another way. And it's just like, okay, that is a massive level of investment, but it's the guy's full-time job.
Yeah. When you're not doing it as a full-time job and you haven't got the financial assets to commit to that yet, because it's about building to that, right? He didn't jump straight into it. I didn't do it with my streaming. I started on TikTok with my Kmart lamps and my soft lighting that we use here that I use for photography, and that's where it started. And then once I was confident enough to grow into getting like my camera mount set up and my desk, which would be purposely set up for the streaming, that's sort of what he did. He's built to it. So yeah, it's good using them as an example, but at the same time, everyone's in a different position. It would be fantastic to have that full setup he's got and be able to have the little like super expensive track with the camera that's automated and all that type of stuff, but build towards it. Unless, of course, you get someone that sponsors you and they're like, hey, Scotty, I believe in what you're doing. I'm going to whack down a heap of cash. And
just need to make sure, but as well, that it suits the people that you've got, your followers. Because if you change, people come to watch you for specific reasons as well. If you go make yourself the same as everyone else, then you don't have that pizzazz to who you are. You don't want to lose yourself just to try and blend in with everyone else that's doing.
Well, yeah, I always make an example of myself and Brush Liquor, or a guy that I raid sometimes on Twitch, Mike Moans. Those guys are like super high energy. That's not me as a person.
That's what I mean, yeah.
My whole thing is like the paint daddy type of thing, where it's just like I'm going to hold your hand and we're going to paint models together, and you can message me and I'll help you improve your painting. I'm not going to be there like, what's up guys, today we're painting Blood Angels. It's going to be the best thing ever. And then like, I'll have my moments where I'm like hyped about something. I'll paint something and be like, yo, that looks sick.
He's wearing a singlet.
Yeah. Just sleeveless Judd. He's a menace. Well, I can't. It's going to be summer, dude. I'm not going to be able to help it. So it gets really hot.
Stream's going to be in danger.
But yeah, I think you need to be true to yourself. Yes. Like you're saying, you need to be genuine, because you get found out pretty quick, and it gets exhausting trying to pretend to be someone else. Yeah. Hopefully your streaming of your tournaments can kick off and you can get to the Wargaming Live point. That'd be sick to see.
Oh, it would be. It genuinely would be. Like, to share a bit of the kind of vision I have for the ATWN is that I'd actually love to have a tournament coverage team in every state, basically. Yeah. So one in South Australia, one in Queensland. We've basically got a New South Wales team up and running. Victoria, I'm good mates with the Risky Rollers down there, so we've kind of got an agreement. You guys will cover events down there, no dramas at all. We won't, we won't kind of cross that state lines, not to put it that way, but there's that mutual respect, right? To understand that is their local scene, they are the experts in that scene, so I understand that they want to cover their local events. No harm, no foul there.
Experts for now.
But yeah, like the passion behind having those teams is because I can travel to different events across the country, but I'm not necessarily fully embedded in that meta. I'm not fully embedded within the Queensland scene, and I don't necessarily... Yes, I can hear of the guys like Liam Hackett or Eric Lathuris and Ben Warrior and some of these big players, but at the same time, I'm not around them in the scene consistently. So I might know how they've been playing recently, what they've been playing list-wise recently, what they've been, developing or learning. And so it's these getting people on board that will have that local player knowledge as commentators to go, all right, I know this player, I've played against him a number of times. Like, I know that more than likely this is what he's thinking of doing in this current situation, to kind of build upon that level of commentary. Because I think with commentating 40k, and to talk to Ben's Lodge's point in chat, it is closer to cricket than it is football to commentate, because it is a slow burn in that sense. I think that having that knowledge of the players at a local level when you're looking to cover a country that is so spread out like ours is actually really important. And so I think Joe does an incredible job. He travels across the country and he probably does stay up to date. But at the same time, maybe he doesn't have that full depth of knowledge outside of, knowing maybe the top 100 players in the country kind of thing. So that's kind of that depth that I'm looking to build with the network. And that's the long-term vision that we're wanting to get to.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it, like Ben said, it's exactly like cricket. And the commentators that watch those games know how those players play, like how they bowl the ball. They're like types of balls they bowl, how guys bat, and they're like their mannerisms when they bat and stuff like that. And it's the same with Warhammer. And it's something that I've...
Except for people wanting to get into Warhammer, Warhammer seems better than cricket.
Yeah. Hey, I
love cricket too, to be fair.
I was saying the other day, I was like, man, I wish I had discovered Warhammer earlier, and then I probably wouldn't have played cricket, because all my friends were playing cricket. And I don't know if I look back now, I was like, I don't know if I was that interested in playing it. At the time, I just played it because my mates played it. But that's something to touch on. Like, I'm aware that my knowledge of the people that play in the local scene isn't that high. I think I've got pretty good knowledge of lists and what lists are capable of doing, just through me absorbing knowledge and it not being able to get out of my brain. But Lockie himself knows of the people in the scene, and he was going to be one of the guys I was going to ask as a commentator, because he's just all over absolutely everything. So I could be like, come on, and he would know the players and how they play and the lists they're playing and the ins and outs of stuff. So
Lockie would make the commentary like you're watching a video game.
Lockie would be up there.
Is he going to be doing this? Why is he sending his termagants there?
Yeah. Totally.
And even to that point, there are different kinds of commentary as well. Like if you look at League of Legends, for example, Mark's familiar with it. There's going to be commentators that are fully knowledgeable about the stats.
Yes.
They'll know what a player can do. They'll know what a character can do. They might know the pick ban rate, for example. But there might also be color commentators that will know more about the team's history, or how a team has actually gotten to, say, the LCS finals or somewhere in that ballpark, right? So I think a combination of both, where you're going, okay, cool, we've got someone that is super in depth on the factions, as well as super knowledgeable on the players as well. Having two people that can go, okay, one super in on the factions, knows what's going on the top tables, or how this faction should perform on the table, and someone who does know the players in and out and knows how they've been going in the local scene, how long they've been playing, that bit of player history is also super important. So having that dichotomy, as I was saying, is super good, because I know Ben also pulled that up in chat, that if you have a commentator that's too focused on the local scene, it can be quite insular, and I think I agree. But having it someone that is aware on a state level is a lot easier to achieve than having someone like myself maybe travel up to Queensland to cover an event without having someone on commentary that knows the local scene.
Yep. Yeah. No, it does make sense.
Well, we'll soon find out how difficult it's going to be, because we've been in chats with a few potential top table streaming at some tournaments, but we'll see.
Yes.
Not counting any chickens before they're hatched. No. I think that sort of brings us to a good point in the podcast to sort of finish things up, because I believe we've got a heap of stuff we could talk about. So I think we could easily bring Scotty back for a second podcast.
I was going to say, I think we probably need to bring Scotty back for a second one, even if it's, in 6 months, because in 6 months you would have done quite a few tournaments by then, wouldn't you? And a few events. So we can sort of recap how everything's gone, and then we can kind of see what the growth and stuff of the hobby is like within the tournament scene as BFG grows.
Yeah. Because
more than happy to.
Yeah, it's often difficult to get people on podcasts. So
yes,
if we can have a nice information-filled podcast here with you, Scotty, and then come back with a second one, that'd be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, consider it done. I'm more than happy to report back with how things go at Adelaide Uprising in January, because we are heading out there, and New South Wales, we're going to have a bunch of events in the first half of next year as well. Definitely we'll have a lot to report on.
Yeah, I will get you to send me the links that I can put in the YouTube video and the Spotify podcasters videos, just so people will be able to click on them so they can find all of the AustralisTWN stuff. And thank you very much for your time, dude.
Yes,
it was a pleasure chatting to you. Undoubtedly we'll keep in touch. Good luck with operations in Space Marine 2. Hopefully, we might even be able to play some games together, man. We'll get you on that lethal. We'll get on some lethal difficulties. Yeah, we'd be sick.
I got to do a lot of ranking up first, but I'll get there.
Well, they took away the awkward tight knit group, which was frustrating.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll do it. I now need to play with Scotty. I need to play with Imsy on Space Marine 2. So maybe I'll just dedicate a couple of streams solely to playing with people on Space Marine 2. That'd be cool. All right, guys. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, I completely forgot to tell you to like, share, and subscribe at the start of the video. So here it is at the end. Do it, because it helps us out and it helps Scotty out. It helps us all grow. The more you do it, the more we can create. So,
and as you see, the community is growing amongst the communities. You've got painters like Judd, then people like Scotty doing the events. So all aspects of the hobby are coming together, and you can learn. Everyone gets to learn every aspect, and that's kind of what the goal is between most people, or like all of us. So keep tuning in.
All boats rise with the tide.
The rising tide lifts all ships.
Yay. That's the one. That's exactly what I said. All right. Awesome. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much.
See you later, Scotty, even though we're going to chat after the podcast. See ya.
See you.